So we just finished. We just had our breakthrough to Zen retreat over the weekend. So we had people zooming in, kind of from the East Coast and also the Northwest, and yeah, it was a really good retreat, really solid. Um, just a lot of really strong practice going on over the weekend. It felt for me, like kind of witnessing that. And, during these retreats over the weekend, I try to kind of dig around and find like some Zen stories or some Zen poems to just share. And really good for me, like looking around for that stuff. One of the figures that we looked at a little bit this weekend was the kind of the wandering monk Ryokan. He's a well-known kind of Japanese poet, and he lived from 1758 to 1831. And what you read about him is that wherever he goes, um, like the people's houses that he visits, and like the villages that he goes to just to spend time, or on alms rounds, those kinds of things. The people talk about how peaceful the place feels when he's there, like his presence. And, there are different stories about how just with his being, he kind of helps situations um, to kind of resolve, or to be in a place of harmony and peace. I took a photo of one of the stories on my phone here, uh, and I'll just read it. So his household was called Yamamoto, and it was managed, so Ryokan's family household, when he left, it was managed by his younger brother Yushi after Ryokan left and became a monk. And Yushi's eldest son, Umanosuke, was squandering the family money for his own personal pleasures. Asked by Umanosuke's mother to give him advice, Ryokan went to the village and stayed with them for a few days. But he said nothing. On his departure for his hermitage, Ryokan stood at the porch, called for Umanosuke, and asked him to tie the strings of his straw sandals. Umanosuke's mother, who stood behind the screen, was hoping that Ryokan would give him some strong advice. Umanosuke didn't understand why Ryokan had asked him to do such an unusual thing, but he followed his request. As he bent to the task, he felt something wet on his neck. He was surprised to look up, and he saw Ryokan's eyes full of tears. At that moment, he felt repentance for his wrongdoings. Ryokan stood up and left without a word. So simply by, having his nephew tie his sandals and, showing what he was feeling, and his presence alone, he kind of affected that situation. And there's many instances of him doing very simple, powerful things like that. So it got me thinking just a little bit about when I was living at Gyokuryuji in Japan with Shinzan Roshi. He always used to tell us, you have to create good relations. He would say, have to create good relations, have to create good relations. And, I would always different people were at the temple, and there's always kind of those challenges and like the friction between the different people. And so I would, sometimes I would go and I would complain about this person or that person. And he would always say, you have to create good relations. You have to create good relations. And I was always so upset because he would never do anything about it. And because it was their fault. It was always their fault. And, he would just keep kind of patting me gently and say, create good relations, create good relations. So I just kept thinking about that, what he was saying there, and how Ryokan, like, it's who he is. He's just this, it's so interwoven into the fabric of his being through his practice and through his presence, that he's just kind of emanating this kind of good relations, these good relationships and this good kind of peaceful energy. And of course, working with others and having that friction, that's a huge part of our lives, and where our practice really can bear fruit and where we can learn a lot. It's the other people that we engage with that are going to show us the buttons. They're going to push our buttons, and they're going to show us where we can grow and how we can kind of work through that. And nonetheless, kind of be in good relations with that person, hopefully. I remember when I was practicing up at Bukokuji Temple, which is on the Sea of Japan in northern Japan there. I practiced there for a few years. And this is just another example of, how I was really in my head and kind of in this kind of us versus them mentality. We used to have, there were all these monkeys that would come every now and again, like every month. This herd of monkeys, wild monkeys from the mountains, would come to our temple and kind of be staying in the trees in the forest around, and also coming onto the temple roofs. And I had a room in the second floor of the canon hall, the one of the chanting halls. So sometimes the monkeys would come up close to the window and kind of look at me. Sometimes, and I didn't like that because that was my space, And I remember one time kind of being in the back of the temple, and the monkeys were there on the roof, and I was completely in my own, the churning and the anger for the frustration towards the monkeys. And the head monk, Genshu-san was his name. He had been there for 23 or 25 years. Just this real soft spirit. He had frostbite all over his fingers, all over his toes. His ears were black as well. He had just, really old-fashioned style monk, and just such a soft heart. And we were in the back there, and he came up to me when I was kind of looking up at these monkeys and, thinking bad things about them for the most part. He came up and he said, and I said in Japanese, "Saru ga iru yo, saru ga iru yo." There are monkeys. And he said, and he felt it right away. And he softened. He said, in Japanese, he said, "Nakayoku shite, nakayoku shite." And nakayoku is like, be friendly or make friends with them. Make friends with them. And it was like, geez. Okay. Like a real ego hit, when you're in it, you're so in it, in the us versus them mentality and how I'm going to get the upper hand and the competitiveness and like the, whatever it is. And then somebody, is kind of basing from that wiser perspective And they're kind of like, hey, come on, you know, have a bigger mind here. You know, you're on the same team. So, you know, with the people and the animals in our lives, you know, that's the path that we're on really with our practice. When we talk about kind of the bodhisattva path, like having the heart or the mind of awakening, you know, it isn't narrow and small and grounded in that like us versus them perspective, of course, right? We know that. But you know, when we're in that place that I was in, there's that there's a sense of separateness there, right? We're kind of there's a strong sense of an individual solid us or me. And then there's something else that's kind of created by my heart and my mind and stories about it and emotions that come up. So that's, you know, that's not really in line with enlightenment too much. I mean, the process of it is, and, you know, working with it, but like using that as kind of like the kind of the original place to engage with life from, you know, that's a place of separateness. And then the other stage that Shinzan Roshi is pointing out to me, you know, create good relations. And hey, you know, be friendly, you know, be friends. That's very much from the place of oneness, of, you know, interconnection, of, hey, we've got these different emotions that are coming through there and different stories and thoughts about whoever, but I can let that, you know, I can let that habit energy kind of play out. I can create a safe space, a kind, open, accepting space in my awareness for that stuff. And it can still be there. And then I can, you know, I can do what I can to, to be on the same team with whoever it is. And, you know, it's very much in line with the precepts. You know, we talk about the precepts and what does it mean to live an ethical life, a life that's in line with awakening. And one of the precepts is talking about not criticizing, you know, not having a harsh speech, not, you know, having rumors about people or others. And then there's a precept about not harboring anger. And it really makes sense because that stuff is very, it kind of locks us in or it closes us off. Versus, you know, when we try to notice it and to work with it and to work through it, you know, there's a wider mind, there's a wider heart. There's that, the kind of the oneness of things that that becomes very apparent for us. And, you know, when we're thinking about, okay, creating good relations, how do I create good relations? You know, because bad relations, it isn't, you know, it's not good for us. It's not good for them. I'm not saying don't set boundaries. Often we need to. Often we need to be clear what's okay and what's not. And we don't necessarily have to be on great terms with everybody. Maybe leaving some things, some space is a good place to be sometimes. But, you know, when we're looking at whoever it is, how to create good relations with them, sometimes it needs to be us that kind of reaches out, and maybe we need to get the short end of the stick a little bit. Maybe we need to kind of let them win a little bit and be okay with that. It's almost like if we can give them that, then they're not in a place of threat and conflict quite as much, and there's a softness there. Yeah. And, you know, as our practice continues and as we kind of see the truth that we are and the truth that's all around us. You know, sometimes in Zen, in Buddhism, they talk about kind of like the Pure Land state, how, you know, right now, this moment, this place is absolutely just fine as it is. We have everything that we want. We're playing with house money, as they say. Like, we're playing with house, we are house money. We don't need to, you know, we're given this life and this time and this place. So how can we engage with it from a meaningful perspective? And, you know, if we're seeing more and more that this is kind of that kind of a place, it doesn't really make sense to get caught up in these little arguments all the time, and to be very much in a place of conflict and opposition to everybody or every situation that we find ourselves in. So it's a very small tweak, what Roshi was telling me. You know, head into the situation and create good relations. What would that mean? It's just that small shift, and that intention like begins to change everything. And, you know, this idea of like the big heart or the awakened heart, the big mind, you know, when we think about being on our deathbed, very few of those things are going to be important for us. You know, often yeah, that stuff kind of falls by the wayside. So let's see. I've been reading this this book. I've been sharing this for a few weeks now. But the First Free Women. It's the kind of the enlightenment poetry of the first Buddhist nuns, the first few free women. And we looked at a lot of these poems during the Breakthrough to Zen retreat as well. And here's just a poem about from an older nun here named Dharma is her name. Another day walking in circles with an empty bowl, leaning on my staff in the middle of the road, my whole body shaking with hunger. What little strength I had left me. As I was falling to the ground, I saw I was the spoonful of rice, and this whole world the bowl. You can't miss, even if you try. I was the spoonful of rice, and this whole world was the bowl. You can't miss, even if you try. And just a little bit about kind of the impermanence and how, you know, this time that we're given is very meaningful, and to really, you know, engage with it from a place of kindness and connection and open-heartedness. She talks about some of this poetry is so interesting because these women were, you know, they were married before, they had children before, and they reflect kind of on that previous life. And then once they kind of stepped onto the path and became a nun, it's really an interesting perspective. Anupama is her name. She writes, growing up, my sisters and I had gold coins for toys. When there's that much money around, being beautiful isn't such a big deal. Somehow, we all were. All my suitors started off talking about beauty and ended up talking about money. One prince told my father, give me your daughter and I will give you 8 times her weight in gold. That night, my father kept passing me the mashed potatoes and ordered extra dessert for the entire table. For some reason, I was remembering those gold coins and how we sometimes put them into our mouths. The taste of gold is something you never forget. When my thoughts drifted back to the table, my father was staring at my half-eaten pudding. I could see in his eyes that he was doing the math. That night, I cut off my hair, climbed out the window, and walked away. I knew it would be a long journey. At least I was starting on a full stomach. That was many years ago. Looking now at these old hands, I can't help thinking the prince's offer was a little silly. Any day now, the crows and dogs will get all of this for nothing. Know your price, my sisters. Don't accept less. So that's a good one. That's a good one, isn't it? Yeah. So, yeah, just a couple of things that I was really feeling were up for me during the retreat, and just really remembering that phrase by Shinzan Roshi, you know, you have to create good relations, have to create good relations. So in the time we have left, you know, thinking about what that means for us to have good relations in our life, and maybe one or two things that we need to do to kind of reach out and to really mend things, or to establish that, or to help that person. Ryokan has his death poem, the traveling monk, you know, whose presence really affected so many people and so many villages. His poem, when he was dying, he says, "Now it reveals its hidden side, and now the other. Thus it falls, an autumn leaf. Now it reveals its hidden side, and now the other. Thus it falls, an autumn leaf." So we're going to do